Hey everyone, welcome to the CSI Secret Store community call. Today is the March 2nd, 2023. This call is recorded and will be published on YouTube, and it follows the CNCF Code of Conduct. And if you haven't already added your name to the list of attendees, please go ahead and do so. I think in terms of newcomers, there's Anjali on the call. Anjali, did you quickly want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Anjali Telang. I am the PM for Auth in Red Hat and interested in the Secret Store CSI driver implementation.
Welcome. Okay. In terms of announcement, we didn't add anything here, but just quickly wanted to say that we released 1.3.1 during the last release cycle last month that had CVE patches and and a bug fix. And then I think we are again up for the next release next week. So like after the patch Tuesday. We will cut the 1.3.2 release. And I think we'll have Nilek try it out this time, the release. And then I think that'll be the base image patches again. Like we've also merged a couple of PRs, so we'll probably cherry pick those to just get that in. So we can cut the release after next Tuesday so that the patch release Tuesday is done. In terms of moderating, I can moderate the call. Anyone wants to help take notes? If not, I can write down notes as we discuss.
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think in terms of agenda, we only have one item that Xander added. Xander, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I can give a little primer. So the number one customer request that I've been hearing, and given like there's a certain amount of bias there, right? Because like a lot of this is coming from teams inside Microsoft that are using the CSI Secret Store driver. And so it's kind of skewed towards Microsoft's needs in a sense, but I think there's value outside too. Is using the driver in disconnected scenarios. And so we've been, getting a lot of like, okay, if I have a cluster, an edge running cluster that only is going to have connectivity roughly every 72 hours, how can I use the driver still? And up until now, we've been steering those folks towards like external secrets operator and Kubernetes secrets, because then, you don't have the issue of like when the pod starts, trying to use the driver to reach out to the secret store and fails. I started putting this design doc together just to kind of noodle on ways that we could support this pattern through a cache of secrets that were fetched. And then I've got a little section on there that was kind of informed by chatting with Mo very briefly on how we could store the cache secrets. But yeah, if folks could like take a look at this and just add comments, or I guess we can chat about the design here to kind of help flesh things out, like what this could look like. And yeah, so the initial thought was like on the provider class, you could add a TTL field. And, I think that would be, you'd have the TTL at the whole provider level then rather than individual secrets, but that's, I have that down in open questions, whether we want like a separate TTL on a per secret basis. And then on the status, you can have a timestamp that reflects the last fetch, like when the secret was refreshed. And then scroll down a little bit. This is the part that, chatting with Mo, you can have a cache volume that stores the secrets. There would be a Kubernetes secret in the namespace of the driver that could store a key that would be used to encrypt the volume that stores the actual cache. yeah, so it's kind of a rough design right now. Yeah, that's what I have so far.
So I haven't thought about the whole problem space like enough to necessarily have like super good suggestions yet, but like one like very similar approach that I had thought about with, I think, and I talked to Anish about this like in passing a while back, was if it would either make sense or be maybe even necessary to, instead of like having this purely at the driver level, having like expanding the scope of the API of the actual providers. So when they respond with a secret to the driver, that at that instant, they tell us that they want caching for how long and like what parameters the cache is valid under. Because
Sure.
what I'm unclear about this, because I just haven't dug deep enough into, like, it's been a really long time since I looked at the driver and provider APIs, but what I don't think we want to happen is what happened today on like kubelets, where if you have a protected image on a node that is only pullable if you have credentials, if a pod runs that has access to it, we an image pull secret, it'll get cached on the node. And if a different pod runs that doesn't have access to it, as long as it doesn't try to do a pull, the node will just let it have access to the image, because the cache is not smart enough to remember who asked for it. It's
Sure.
just, is it present? And I don't think we want to have that same sort of like misbehavior. Like, it's one thing to say you can kind of pull like just data that is just code to run. Like, I mean, I don't like that at all anyway, but like, this is worse to me. Like, like it is the thing that you were calling a secret. So I don't think you just want, oh, because I happen to hit the driver in a scenario where it can use the cache, that it just lets me have the cache. The other thing that I don't know if it's written in here, what I talked to Nish about is that the cache would not be like, in the sense like a traditional cache, it would be more of like a fallback cache. So like the driver would always try to do a live pull, and if the error it got was concretely something that it could define as like the network is down or whatever
Right.
scenario, then and only then would it say, all right, let me look at my cache. Because for example, if it gets an error that's like 401, like this user or this entity is not allowed to pull the secret, right? We want to respect the fact that some access was revoked, even if it was previously present. But that's like, I think, the limit of like how much I've thought about this. So if others have thought more, go for it. Anish, Noek, any, or Tommy, any of y'all, have y'all thought about this space? Is there any obvious like broken behaviors that you see if we change or have this functionality?
I think, yeah, you bringing up like what the keys of the cache are is probably the biggest thing. I'm less concerned about it being at the driver versus the provider or like per secret level. Like, I think generally at the secret provider class is probably like a fair place to put it. But yeah, I guess you do need at the individual secret level, the like auth responses, right? So yeah, I think the cache key, and then whether or not that's doable at the provider versus, or driver versus provider.
Yeah, I think initially when we talked, we did start at the provider level, the discussion when it started. And then I think later we were thinking it could be moved to the driver level just because the provider gets the secrets and then returns it. So like when it returns it, it can also add this additional metadata telling the driver like, hey, this is something that you can use. And also if you think about it, the provider could still cache it. So like I was looking at AWS SDK. So their SDKs already have some kind of caching. So like if you make calls for like the same secret again, like at least the Go SDKs, they have caching where it caches it the first time, keeps it with the TTL policy, and then the next call with that SDK will just fetch it from the cache rather than making an external call, right? So even if you keep it this thing at the driver level, like the provider would still do whatever it needs to. Like it can even get from cache, or it can go and talk KMA, to the external secret store, and then return it to the driver. But I think having it at the driver would make it a little more complex just because of all the semantics. But it would just benefit every provider that wants to use disconnected scenarios. Like it's still an opt-in kind of feature. But Tommy, quick question for you. Like, has anyone in Google asked about this, like with Anthos, like any disconnected scenario conversation comes up?
I think some disconnected conversations do come up. I don't think we've had an explicit ask for the driver. I'm not sure. I haven't been as involved on the secret manager stuff lately, so I can ask our PM about it. Sorry, as you were talking, I was thinking through, like, part of the cache key would just be the identity of the pod, right? Making the request. I'm not
problem,
right.
I think there is, so I think I talked to Anish about this. We would want the cache to be usable if the network was down, but your your cluster goes through like a rescale event, right? So like you add like a replica or something.
Yeah.
So it can't just be the pod. It has to be like.
Oh, yeah, like the pod identity though is provided through the service account, right? Is one of the inputs to the mount request, which should, I think, be stable across scaling events. I think we have the identity, not just the token is right. So like I need to look up the code to see what.
Yeah, I don't fully remember exactly the details provided there. I think it would maybe be sufficient to just say it's the service account, you know, with the asterisk saying that we should then also make sure to encourage people not to reuse service accounts across services, like distinct things, because then our cache key is based off of one thing, but then their workloads are based off of another, and that doesn't seem like a recipe for success.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm missing something on the Kubernetes service account identity is what at least the GCP driver is using to like make the call to the external like secret API. So I think as long as like if you're using the same service account within Kubernetes for two different things, you'd still like be able to access those secrets anyway.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Anish, I vaguely I remember looking. So I was a little bit confused when I was looking at like the CSI driver spec and like the mounts and stuff when I was looking at the Kubernetes code base. Is it that the provider is given like unique service account tokens with unique audiences for that particular deployment or whatever? Like
so in the CSI driver object, there's this field called token requests. So basically there you can configure what audiences you want the token for, like, and then you can also configure like multiple different audiences. So depending on how many audiences you configure, you will get a token for each audience, and then you can also configure the TTL. So this is same as the projected service account token volume, but you just add these things in the token requests field.
Right. But then at the end of it, what happens is you, the driver, are presented with service account tokens with that audience set, but with the actual service account of the pod.
Sorry, what was that? Could you repeat it more?
So when the driver is, when the provider is presented with all of this information, it's a list, it's passed in a list of tokens, and those tokens all are matched one-to-one with the audiences requested there. But the actual service account in the token is the pod's service account, right? So it's the pod's identity.
That's right.
Okay, so I mean, I guess that's probably sufficient, right? I don't know, something was bugging me about this, and I was concerned, and I was like, maybe it has to be at the provider level, but that's fine. Like, if that's already effectively used as the auth check.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the providers do support that option today, which is why it makes it plausible. Like, I mean, all of them support workload identity, and they all rely on just the service account today for all the providers.
Yeah, I've just been dumping like notes in the comments as everyone's talking. Like, I do know that the GCP one, we at least have like a few different options where like we get that identity as input, but it is possible based on like other configuration for the provider to use like a different identity, like the identity of the node instead of the pod. So like, I could see that at least breaking some flows on the vast majority of flows on GCP is using the pod identity, but we do have like some ways to do other things. So I tried to mention that in the comment, and I think one way would be like providers just return like a caching key or some like opaque object that like the provider says this is like an okay thing to cache on versus that. Yeah,
I guess it's a little bit unclear to me, like if a provider returns something to do as the cache key, how does the driver know what to do with it to do a lookup?
You're right. Makes sense. Okay.
I mean, I
good
guess
point. Yeah. Yeah.
There might be a little bit of a
I think there's probably a way to do like to put like a lot of the caching implementation like into the driver, but yeah, the identity stuff. Yeah, like managing the cache and the encryption on the cache and stuff, like I could see implementing in the driver. I think we're having a hard, like, as I'm hearing the discussion, I'm less convinced about, yeah, the caching key and identity and like making sure we're not creating a confused deputy without like changing provider implementations.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of it, even if we ended up having to require some change from a provider, I think no matter what, I don't think anyone is saying this is a default behavior. I think everyone is saying is you opt in, not effectively live lookups against your backend.
Yeah, like I think it's easy enough to like add proto fields and like check whether, you know, or not a provider. Like we could have something where whether or not a provider supports this functionality, right? Or whether or not like at a provider deployment level, they want to allow it. I like the feature. I like the idea. Yeah, I'm generally supportive.
Well, I'm just gonna keep working on this design doc then, and you know, feel free to keep checking in on this and adding stuff to it, and I'll continue, you know, soliciting feedback in the community meeting, and I think it'll, at least on the Microsoft side, it'll be a little while before we can like actually play with any kind of implementation of anything, at least until after 127 launches. yeah, so the design will continue.
Yeah, I think the next thing that we need to focus is like the cache key part. So like probably we can iterate over that and then do a follow-up in the next community call and see if we make progress on that.
Sounds good.
Do folks have any ideas on the storage of the cache? Like is like the suggestion I made about having an encrypted volume was like just literally the first thing that came to mind. So it's not exactly a refined or well thought through idea, but it didn't seem right to like put it in Kubernetes secrets because that's what we said we weren't going to do. And even if you like pre-encrypt them and then put in Kubernetes secrets, it still doesn't seem right. Like it just doesn't really seem to solve the thing that we're trying to prevent. I might be misremembering this. I remember seeing some kept go by about kubelets having a new type of volume that was sort of meant as like a local scratch pad that was like better than empty-dir, but I don't fully remember exactly, or if that ever even made it into an actual thing.
I can go through and look. I should probably be more familiar with the keps of this release anyway, and so I'm not sure if it's in 127, but I can go through and look.
But yeah, like it. Oh, go ahead, Nish.
So I was going to say the only thing is if we use a local volume cache, then we would be in that behavior where we can only say pods that land on that particular node which has the cache would work in case of disconnected scenarios, right? Like the cache is not distributed across all the nodes.
Yeah, that would be annoying. I guess certainly you could get very fancy and replicate your little cache.
Oh, that's a very, I don't know, difficult problem.
Yeah, it's called run etcd.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which I don't think any of us wants to do. But yeah, that's a fair point. That doesn't really work across instances of the provider.
But wouldn't be, I mean, it could be still fine, right? Unless the nodes are out of capacity. I mean, we can just say like, I mean, the cache will be only on like those nodes where the pods have previously been running. And even in disconnected scenario, if new pod try to come up, it will eventually probably get scheduled on the particular pod. I mean, they can have like probably a node affinity or something like that, so that
But
you
that's
would
the
get
thing, right? It's not like a deterministic behavior. Like you don't know which node has that cache. You don't know if it is a valid cache. Like it's hit and miss.
right. What I was thinking is maybe a workload that needs to be run in a disconnected scenario will always be scheduled on a particular node. So we can have that node affinity from the get-go. So every time the workload gets scheduled, it will be on a specific node, and naturally then that node would have cache.
I think that might break the use case of like scaling up or like scaling events.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to think whether it's the right way to do it or not, basically. Or I mean, can it be justified basically? But the scaling part is definitely true.
So right now, if you have this problem and you're basically stuck with using like ESO, right? Which will put the secrets into Kubernetes secrets in sort of the namespaces of the workloads, right? I mean, I suppose you could make the argument that if we put the secrets in the driver's namespace, they're still protected by the namespace boundary, but they're not sort of protected from actors on the cluster that have like wide secret read access, like ingress controllers. So it's like maybe it's like an incremental step forward, but maybe not as good as we want, right? I mean, I suppose we could solve this by making a like a new CRD called like encrypted secret, right? And then just having one Kubernetes secret that holds our encryption key, and then having encrypted blobs stored in the other ones.
Well, isn't this the exact thing that we're trying to? I mean, this is the exact edge of CSI driver over ESO, right? To not store secrets on the cluster.
Right, Anjali. So the Kubernetes secret that would be stored on the cluster is just like a random encryption key. And we at this point you can make it like a one-to-one, like so there would, for every custom resource that's going to hold encrypted data, there would be a one-to-one mapping with a secret, like a Kubernetes secret, but that's just a key, like an encryption key used once to encrypt and decrypt that one value. But then if you have a custom resource that's holding it, that's just encrypted blobs, nothing should have access to read those, including any ingress controllers or any users. Right. So you sort of offset it. You're basically indirecting the check. So that way, the only thing that has access to it is basically the driver or a cluster admin, which we don't care about the cluster admin because they can just exec into the driver and do whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah. I think if you open it
I mean,
up to
that's
the cluster admin, that could be, yeah.
I am also talking to HashiCorp probably tomorrow about, since Vault is the only like big secret store I know of that can run on cluster, I just wanted to chat with them and see if they've had like any users like mentioning this problem space before like trying to use a cloud provider's secret store in a disconnected scenario. And yeah.
Xander, do you know like where they put the data if it's running on cluster? Because I mean, you need some keys somewhere. But I guess I don't know. Does my idea of basically indirecting through like an encrypted custom resource, does that seem viable? As it's all it is basically the same thing as the file system based storage. It's just using etcd as a synchronization mechanism.
Yeah, that would work. Like that is what I was going to say next, right? Like if we have to share state across different CSI drivers, then we just have to come up with another object and then store whatever we need there.
And you get the benefit of the like the control loop and everything. And
there's like one of the design considerations like years ago was a desire for different like nodes to like one node wouldn't be able to act as a service account of like all nodes. I'm not sure if that like ever fully got realized in Kubernetes, where like, yeah, some service accounts can only execute on like a subset of nodes, or like a node pool or something like that. And so like one of the things that we've been doing on the CSI driver was like moving more towards pod identity for fetching the secrets, so that we're not using just like a global identity or globally having like full access to secrets in the cluster. So I'm not sure if that like goal of Kubernetes security was ever realized, but there might be some like having a cache that's usable across nodes in the cluster may make that configuration more difficult. But people that want that configuration may not overlap with the people that want disconnected environments. So I just remember that being discussed a while ago. I'm not sure if it still applies, but yeah.
Yeah, so for kubelets, there's the node restriction admission plugin and the node authorizer. So if a kubelet attempts to like fetch a service account token for an identity that's not scheduled on it, it will fail. as unauthorized, but otherwise it will succeed. So that's already enforced, like in terms of like workloads that are running. This one's a little bit, I think, more nuanced because it's more of like, I think the relationship is not known to Kubernetes that this driver services all of these workloads, but this instance of this driver is on this node, which has these pods. Like, I think that part of the graph is unknown to it. And like in the design with the custom resources, it does end up that every driver instance across every kubelet would be able to read all of the secrets that are like in its namespace and stuff. But I don't know if it really changes anything though, right? Because it already had access to the actual secrets from the vault. Like it could have just asked the provider to give it to them.
I guess this makes it though, so like a node that wasn't able to fetch a secret like may now be able to. Like if there's a global cache, I need to think about this some more.
Yeah, I think I would need to like draw some pictures and try to figure out like where the pointers are and which ones we just added ourselves.
It may just be worth calling out in the design. Like, I'm not sure if it's needed to solve it here.
No, I think it's a good point though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot immediately convince myself that we haven't made it worse. So
Yeah.
I think it's figuring out. Mhm.
You're muted, Anish.
No, sorry. Okay, I think so. We have few other open questions. We can summarize that here, but I think like the primary ones are the cache key, and then also understanding if you want to replicate this cache or if you want to keep the local volume behavior. Like I think like those are two areas that I think we need as a next step. So like if we have more information added regarding that in the doc, then we can discuss that more in detail before we go and do any kind of POC.
I noted those down in the open question section.
And Tommy, if you want to add the comment that you mentioned last also in the doc, so that's part of the consideration.
Yep, will do.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for starting the discussion, Xander, with the doc. Okay. Anjali, I think this was, you added this one?
Yeah, so probably this was already discussed. I'm just newly joining. So, one thing that was flagged by, one of our customers was that the secret store CSI driver does require root level privileges, and especially with OpenShift SECs in restricted mode, how does this impact? Will the we need changes in the SECs? And most likely we do, because it requires root privileges. Any thoughts on restricting privileges in future? Any discussions around that that's already happened? I would love to catch up on that.
So I think that this came up as a question in a couple of issues, and which is why we documented why we need the privileged access today. So like this is specifically for mounting the host path in, like, and then the tempfs inside the pod.
Right.
And then on the provider side, I think like it was mostly around being able to create the socket. Like that was one of the reasons. There is an open issue to see if we can drop the root requirement on the providers, but the socket is still a blocker. Like, I mean, we can go look at it, but as of now, I think like both of this is required, which is why we have this documented here.
Yeah, is there any plans for working through the privileges in the future?
I mean, we can certainly try and see if we can drop it. Like, I think the last time we tried it, I think HashiCorp provided, they had opened the issue to see if we can do some kind of investigation. We did try to do that, but figured like it is not possible to drop it. Like, at least in terms of the requirements, we tried to like get rid of a lot of the things that would need those privileges, but I think there's still like one permission which needs that. So as of now, I think there's not a lot of work going on, but we can again revisit in the future and see if we can drop it.
Yeah, if it's on the roadmap also, that would help.
Yeah, it's in the backlog right now. But I mean, also like if you have any folks looking at it, like we can chat with them and see if they can also help out.
That sounds good. Yep.
Can somebody remind me if user namespaces is a thing yet in Linux and
It
Kubernetes?
is coming. I think Brunal is going to work on it from Red Hat at some point, is what I've heard.
Honestly, when I worked at Red Hat, like when I started working at Red Hat, they told me it was coming in 2016.
Yes, yeah,
So-
but that's something that is, definitely something we've heard everyone wants it, right?
So I think that kind of stuff might be like a prereq, right? Is if you have to have, I think, a little bit more support from the underlying OS to express the permissions you need as tightly as you can. And I think right now we've done that, right? We've said that we need root because we have to mount. Like at the end of the day, being a CSI driver is a privileged thing if you're going to do like host path UDS and mount stuff and then have the ability to keep changing the mounts because that's what we need to be able to do to refresh secrets and stuff. We've kind of put ourselves in that catch-22, right? Like
Sure. Yeah. I think, but that opens up a whole bunch of permission level things that we have to handle at the SCC level and at the PSA level to make sure that this is running at the right.
Yeah, I totally agree. If we can make this more restricted, we should. I don't know. I don't know if there's something that Secret CSI Store can do without like help from the OS, basically. Like
That makes sense. Yeah, that I agree with.
Yeah, this did come up quite a bit. I think that's why we also documented that as a section saying like why we need all these privileges. But if there's actually a cap for that, like, or something like work going on, we can document that saying if whenever this comes, we can reevaluate. Like we can document that in the issue.
So I think
You mean the user namespace cap? Yeah. Sorry,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
say we will reevaluate like when that is available, like just so that like users know like we are waiting on something to try this out again. Like we can document that in the issue, not in the doc. Okay. Any other items that anyone wants to discuss on the call? No? Okay. I mean, we can also quickly look at the test grid. So I think the jobs are mostly, all of them are passing. Let's quickly look at the periodic ones. I think this one failed once, but otherwise it's mostly been green. Okay, I think all the other tests are passing. And then in terms of issues, I think this one was opened yesterday. Someone wanted to change the CSI driver name. I think they're probably missing setting the driver name flag. But I looked at it this morning, so I can respond to this issue, telling them how they can do that. I would like to have an option to configure Prometheus histogram metrics. Yeah, I think this is a little tricky. Like, I don't know if we want to expose this to the user. At least so far, sorry, go ahead. Tom.
Yeah, I don't know. I have found that to be like necessary on certain services to have much better like histogram boundaries. I haven't seen like the CSI drivers behaving like poorly enough to require it. But I have definitely seen in other production services needing to tune this. So a runtime configuration of that I could see as being useful. It'd be best if like there's other services or like, yeah, other code we could copy for like what a flag would look like to configure this. But I think it's a reasonable request.
Do you think a good first step, sorry, Mo, I think you wanted to talk.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this sounds really strange to me because none of the Kubernetes metrics are configurable like this, as far as I know. Like you get the metrics that you get, and if you don't like them, you make an issue and we make them better, but you don't get to configure them at runtime.
That's also probably true that like you need to match the boundaries to like how things normally perform or how they perform in bad situations. So if these aren't good values, I guess that would, like, it'd be useful to know what good value boundaries would be or what they would want, and like we could just change it here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe we can ask them like what values they are planning to use, and then if we can increase the, I mean, we can just do the exponential thing like that we did in Kubernetes for like KMS stuff too, right? So we can just increase the range and then just add more, like we can go more into the values here. And then like that would be a good start. And then I think beyond that, if more users say like, hey, this doesn't work out for me, I need something more, then I think we can revisit and say, do we want to expose this as a configuration?
Yeah, and I think I would want to ask like what is going awry in your environment that's like the numbers are somehow helping you with. So because like is there something wrong with the driver? Like is it misbehave, or the provider that you're using that it misbehaves where you need to know by looking at the metrics that something has gone and like you need to like have your engineers go fix it or something. Because that just sounds concerning to me at a different level of like the thing is just not functional enough for you.
Okay, I can post a comment here to ask them what works and like what they're using today. So we can use that to see what we want to do. Okay. I thought we closed a similar issue before saying we don't want to do this. At the moment, the created secret can only contain values that have been fetched by the CSI driver. In use cases, when we want to add some non-sensitive data as part of the secret, we had to add those to the wallet and fetch them. Go from this.
That sounds like the thing where we have the open PR of like a way to like mutate the secrets to add additional information or to split them out into different files. There's
Yeah, I think there was an open PR in the driver repo, right? And I think we had closed it out. Yeah, this was closed. Yeah, I think we talked about it in the last community call.
Oh, is it that they just want string data or that they want just additional data?
They just want string data.
I think for additional data, we said like providers can do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking that the transform options configuration block to secret provider class PR that Dane was
Yeah, I
working
think
on
Dane
was
hasn't.
like, yeah, I think we want to pick that back up, but like I think that the way I read that bug could be solved by this, where like if they just want other non-secret data statically added to the mount and to just configure that as part of the secret provider class, that the generic like mutation stuff would be a at least like a clean way to do that that's reusable.
Okay. Tommy, do you want to comment on this issue?
Yeah, I can look at, because I think we've had a few comments or issues like this. I'll try to find the other ones.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'll reach out to Dane. Like, I think I'll see if he can join the call the next time. But if not, maybe we can pick it up.
Yep.
Yeah, this one, I think the OCI provider, they reached out and then they're planning to add a new provider. I actually saw they created a repo. So they have a provider now, and I think it's like testing images. But whenever they reach out in terms of being added as supported provider, we can work with them through our process and see if we can get them onboarded. Okay, this one I already responded. I might follow up and just close this one out because I pointed them that the driver name was wrong. Okay, in terms of pull requests, so for this adding keyless, so I think in terms of being a supported provider, they've satisfied all the criteria. Like the only last pending thing was the code review that we had to do, and I did that and I opened few issues on their repo. The issues have not been closed yet, so I've reached out to this person on Slack telling them like, hey, if you can resolve those issues, we can do another review, and then if everything looks good, we can add that as a supported provider. They already added the CI pipeline for the optional tests and all of that. So the only pending review is action items from the code review. So I'm following up on this, and then I'll give a status update on the next call. Yeah, for this one, this is to add Alibaba as a supported provider. So they also opened a test infra PR. And I think they are testing it right now. But once it's ready for review, I'll tag all the folks here so we can review this PR and also the test infra PR, and then help them merge this so that we can also like eventually add Alibaba as a supported provider. Tommy, I think we probably want to pick this one up either for 1.4 or 1.5 again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's it. anything else anyone wants to discuss before we drop off? No? Okay. So see you all in the next community call on March 16th. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. Bye.